Today is October the 2nd, 2003. This is an interview of Mr. Ben Carella. His birth date is June 30th, 1919. The interview is taking place at the Atlanta History Center. Robert Gardner is conducting the interview. Mr. Carella, what branch of service did you serve in?
Army Air Force, known as the Old Brown Shoe.
What was the highest rank that you attained, sir?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Where did you serve, sir?
Romulus, Michigan, Great Falls, Montana, St. Joe, Missouri, and Wiesbaden, Germany.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted
Where were you living at the time, sir?
in the New York City.
Why did you join?
Well, 2 or 3 reasons. I'd rather be in the Air Force if I was going to be drafted. And I figured that would be a more elite form of soldier than being just a regular GI. And that's the reason I joined.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Oh yes, oh yes. Took a train from Grand Central Station down to Maxwell Field, Alabama, and went through 3 months of basic and GI training before we even got to do any flying or got into the flying end of the business.
Can you tell me about your boot camp or training experiences?
It was very difficult. Get up at about 6:30 in the morning and didn't get to bed till maybe 8 or 9 at night. And of course we performed all sorts of military functions, learning how to march and drill and run. And then at night when you thought you were asleep, the upperclassmen would come in and haze you a little bit, get you to jump out of bed, stand at attention, and get to the point where you wanted to do away with them. But we got to be upperclassmen later on, so we did the same thing. It was just a form of what was going on in those days.
Do you remember any of your instructors?
Oh no, no I do not. I can picture them, but I don't know their names, and no, I can't remember. That's going back too many years.
How did you get through it all, though?
It wasn't easy. We just hung on there and did the best you could. And during the primary training, we lost about, I'd say, 50 to 60% of our people were washed out because they couldn't either pass the flying end of it or couldn't stand the strain or whatever, for whatever reasons. Then when you graduated primary, you got into basic training and you lost another, I'd say maybe 10 to 20% for the same reasons. Of course, you got into a second stage aircraft. We went from the PT-13 Stearman to the Vultee vibrator. And then when you passed that phase of it, you got into advanced training. And when you got to advanced training, you were pretty much in the program because the government had already invested quite a bit of money in training on you, and they weren't about to let you go for minor infractions. And we got into the AT-6, which is the advanced trainer. And of course that was a more sophisticated aircraft with retractable gear and adjustable prop and flaps and all that kind of stuff. So graduated advanced training November 10th, 1942. And my first assignment was to Romulus, Michigan. My last 10 or 15 hours of advanced training were done in a P-40 aircraft. At that time, we were scheduled a program to support General Chennault's efforts in the Far East. And we were going to be some of the replacements that were going to be transferred or sent over to his unit. But at that phase of the game, he wasn't requiring any more replacements because the war there was winding down. So we were assigned to the new developed Air Transport Command, which was a new unit formed in the Army Air Force to transport aircraft from manufacturers to the front lines. And that was about it.
Which war or wars did you serve in, sir?
World War II, and I was on active duty. I was in the Air Force Reserve Active Duty Training Center, and we supported the Vietnam War and the Korean War, but I was not actively engaged there. We just supported them in the form of logistical support, moving equipment and supplies around the United States where they were needed.
Do you remember arriving at any of your specific duty stations and what it was like?
Oh yes, I was brand new lieutenant, graduated November 10th, and graduated in the morning and married my wife in the afternoon, my girlfriend in the afternoon, same day. Then we got transferred. The first assignment was Romulus, Michigan, and took a train up to Detroit and arrived at Romulus. Being a brand new lieutenant and not familiar or acquainted with military life, it was kind of scary, very nervous. And because you were with 10 or 15 other people that you graduated with, so you formed a kind of a little group and you all pushed through together.
Did you see any combat, sir?
No, we did not. I got into combat areas, but I never saw any actual combat. From St. Joe, Missouri, from Romulus, Michigan, we got transferred to Great Falls, Montana, and at that point, we were supporting the Lend-Lease program to the Russians up in Alaska. And our primary duties were to go to Niagara Falls and pick up Bell aircraft, flying back to Great Falls, and then prepare them for a delivery to the Russians up in, at first we were going to Nome, and then we were pushed back to deliver them to Fairbanks. The Russians didn't want us to get too close to their country. And we also went to Niagara Falls, the P-40 Curtiss aircraft company there, picked up P-40s and did the same thing. The P-40s went mostly to Adak, out the Aleutian Islands, to beef up that portion of the effort that we were thinking of invading Japan through the back door, which was going from the Aleutian Islands down into Japan that way, while the other countries, the other units invaded Japan from the front doors. And that's how we got involved into being in combat areas, but never seen any actual combat.
Can you tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences?
Well, in 1942 and 1943, the Alcan Highway was being built, and we had no photographic or photographic maps to guide us. We were given a map that was 10 miles wide, a strip map that the Army Air Corps photographed and developed in a hurry to enable us to guide us up the Alcan Highway to Fairbanks, Alaska. And that's pretty rough country up there. We used to, if you wandered outside this 10-mile strip, you were over country, had no way of recognizing or what to do with. So our primary objective was to stay within sight of the Alcan Highway, which went from Edmonton, Fort Nelson, Watson Lake, Northway, and up to into Fairbanks. The weather going up that way was spotty. The weather forecast was spotty. We didn't have all the modern meteorology experience or knowledge that we have today. At that time, it was just weather stations every 200 or 300 miles apart, run by weather sergeants in the Army, and they were pretty good, really. They would give us their local weather, and we would analyze the weather and make up our minds whether it was go or no go. We had to fly strictly VFR because we had no IFR experience or equipment in those days to fly these fighter planes in IFR weather. The P-39 was equipped with a 165 or 175 gallon belly tank, which would enable us to give us some range. And considering gasoline weighs 6 or 7 pounds a gallon, that was like carrying a 1,000, 1,100 pound torpedo on the airplane, which made it very unstable, to say the least. And these are all things that you learn through experience how to handle. That's about it.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Oh yeah, we were given various medals for going through different theaters of operation. I can't recall them all. I've got medals for going through Alaska, out the Aleutian Islands. Later, in 1945 or 46, I was transferred to the weather wing and qualified in a DC-4, or the C-54 as the Air Force called it, for a 4-engine transport. And we were assigned to the weather wing in Wiesbaden, Germany, 11th Weather Wing. And the crew was given the airplane in Asheville, North Carolina, and we flew over through Bermuda and out to Y-80, which was Wiesbaden, Germany. That was the designation of the airstrip there, was Y-80. And we flew the DC-4 there, and we were assigned to the 11th Weather Wing. And we were supporting, this was during the tail end of the war, we were supplying a lot of the countries there with weather equipment, weather balloons, weather stations, wind gauge unit instruments. The sole purpose was to help these different countries update their weather. In turn, we were flying our aircraft into these countries, and the information we got from them was a little more accurate to enable our airplanes to go in and out of places like Switzerland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, down through Italy, Greece, Spain, Casablanca. We covered Europe, Africa, and the Middle East at that time with the DC-4, and that was the tail end of my active duty assignments. I returned back to the States in, I think it was June of 1947, and I remained in the Air Force Reserve active duty unit. And I stayed with the Air Force Reserve until I retired in 1981, I believe it was. 1969 to 1970 as Lieutenant Colonel. That was my experience in the military.
How did you stay in touch with your family?
Well, my wife traveled with me while I was in the States and when I was stationed in Great Falls, Montana, but when I was sent overseas, I went over alone because they didn't have billets or homes or places for families to come over. So I spent about 14 months in Europe as a married bachelor, so to speak. And we, with the mostly letter writing, that's the only way we stayed in touch. There wasn't any phone calling back and forth. And I got in the habit of writing my wife at least once a day, sometimes at least every 2 days. And the mail, you wouldn't get mail for maybe a week, and then you'd get 6 or 8 letters at one time. Of course, they were going through the Army Post Office. And it was a little lonely at times. When I was overseas, my first daughter was born, and while I was over there, and I didn't get to see her until she was 7, 8 months old, I think. That was the hard part. That's it.
What was the food like?
The food was good. Of course, being an officer in the Air Force, we ate better than most of the Army did, I guess. We were always, there was an old saying, we went up, if we were going to die, at least we died clean and well fed. And the poor GIs, they died cold and ill fed. So anyway, that was just a saying. No, the food, I had no complaints of the food. We ate well, and well clothed.
Did you have plenty of supplies?
Supplies?
Yes, sir.
Oh yeah, we had no trouble with supplies. We had all the clothing we needed. We were well fed, as I said. We were issued 45s and other means of arms that we needed because you couldn't carry too much in an airplane. No, with supplies were well. That's one of the reasons I joined the Air Force, because I knew it was one of the better units to be in.
Did you feel any pressure or stress?
Oh, yeah. Everybody feels pressure and stress. Sometimes it was hellacious, sometimes it was out of boredom, but everybody had pressure and stress those days. Anybody that didn't, I don't think they were normal.
Was there something special you did for good luck?
Just kept a little bit of my religion and faith, prayed to God a couple of times, quite a few times as I recall. No, that was, didn't carry any rabbit's tails or rabbit's foot or anything like that. I didn't believe in those things.
How did people entertain themselves?
Did a lot of drinking, a lot of smoking. We used to meet at the bar after duty hours and play live dice. And of course, drinks there were cheaper than water is today. Cigarettes were free. We entertained ourselves. We just raised a little cane, I guess, now and then.
Were there any entertainers that came over to entertain you?
Yeah, we had the USO groups, and yeah, there was a lot of that. They did a lot of that, as much as they could to entertain the troops. Because during the war, it was difficult. Most of that was done in the States. Soldiers waiting to go overseas. There wasn't too much of that overseas at that time.
What did you do when you were on leave? Did you get any leave while you were in service?
Not while I was overseas. We didn't get any leave where we could come home or anything like that. No. I was only over there a short period, so I like to save up my leave days so when I got home I could have a couple of weeks off. No, we didn't do anything special.
You mentioned some of the places that you went delivering the weather station equipment. Did you get to do any travel or anything?
Oh yeah, we'd load up the DC-4, and one trip we took went to Norway, Denmark and Sweden, and we left all our equipment there, and we were always treated well because we were donating something to these countries, and they were very happy and anxious to get them. And then we delivered equipment down to Rome, brought some down to Casablanca, Greece, down to Paris, France. I can't think of any others.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
Yeah, a couple. We ferrying up north in a P-39, you couldn't carry very much. The engine was behind you. There was a 20mm cannon went through your legs and up to the front, shot out of the propeller hub. So all you could carry was a little bag and some change of underwear and maybe a change of khakis. And I can remember one weekend we were in Edmonton. We all went out to Chinese dinner, which was the wrong thing to do. You don't eat Chinese food in Edmonton, Canada. Anyway, the next day we took off. Of course, we drank a little bit that night. And there were about 4 of us. We all got the GIs. And I made an emergency landing at one of the strips there to relieve myself. And some of the pilots just had to relieve themselves in the cockpit, managed the best they could. When we got together and discussed that, there was more humor to that than anything else. That's one of the things I can remember. And
When you ferried the planes to Alaska, how did you get back from that station to?
they'd wait until they had maybe 10 or 15 or 20 ferry pilots up there, and they'd send a DC-3 up, which was being flown by the airlines. They were converted because there's not too much airline flying going on. It was all under the control of the military. And the airline pilots would pick us up in these DC-3s and herd us on board up in Fairbanks. A trip that took approximately 7 to 10 hours to deliver the airplanes up there took 10 to 20 hours to ferry us back because of the speed. And the DC-3 was, even though we slept in sleeping bags and heavy clothing, they weren't airline type airplanes, they were just military aircraft, DC-3s, and the corrugated metal floors and the bucket seats. And up in Alaska it would be 10 or 15 or 20 below zero, and it was hard to keep warm, very difficult. Some of us went to the parachute room and had hammocks made. We'd bring couple of bottles of scotch up and give them to the parachute manufacturers up there that worked in the hangars that kept the parachutes packed and reconditioned. And we paid him off, and he'd make hammocks for us that we were able to string across from one window to the other with hooks, and at least we slept in the hammocks to keep us off the floor. And then the military come out and said we couldn't use them because in case of emergency, there was no, we were blocking the inside of the aircraft for people to bail out of. Of course, we didn't abide by that rule too much, but that's what went on during those days. You made do and did the best you could. There wasn't too much regulation in those days. It's safety. We didn't abide too much by safety rules. We'd fly up in formation, wingtip to wingtip, come over an airfield. We'd spread them out in echelon, come down and buzz the airport at about 200 or 300 feet. Of course, we were all frustrated air transport pilots. We want to be in active duty, get bit in combat. And we'd make a big sweeping turn and come back and land in formation, and that's the way we kind of relieve some of our tension in those days, just by doing crazy things and taking a lot of crazy chances.
What did you think of your fellow officers and enlisted men?
They're all fine, all supportive, most of them gentlemen. Every once in a while you found an oddball, but that was to be expected. I guess a lot of people thought I was an oddball too. But when you get a bunch of people from the city, from the farms, and from the south and the north, and mix them all together, why, it's quite an interesting mixture of people. I think everything went along real fine.
Did you keep a personal diary?
No, I did not.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yeah, it was. When I was discharged, when I was coming home from Wiesbaden, we went to Hamburg, got on a Liberty ship. That was the old Kaiser ships that were being built with concrete and steel reinforcements. Of course, they're quick to build, but they weren't very safe. They take a certain amount of pounding, then they were known to crack. We got on one of these and took us, I think it was 6.5, 7 days to get back from Europe to the States, and we ran into some pretty bad weather. And I was assigned as a mess officer down in hold number 3, which was the 3rd level down. And I went down there, and just a mixture of food, and I'm not a very good sailor, and the rocking of the ship, and I could see that I wasn't going to enjoy this, so I got a hold of the mess sergeant. I told him, you keep, everything's in you're in charge down here, you keep everything going, and I'll be upstairs on the upper deck. If anything goes real bad, call me. And then that was the last I saw the mess hall down on deck 3. I went on top side and stayed in the officers' quarters and learned how to play bridge. And that was my trip home. And I hit Camp Dix. I was discharged. I got home and went up to see my wife and daughter that I had never seen before. And I found out that they were shopping at the A&P. My mother-in-law told me, so I walked around to the A&P and walked in, and there she was with the baby. And of course that was quite a reunion, right in the A&P. And I was happy to be home.
What did you do in the days and weeks immediately afterward?
I was on a fireman's list in those days, and I went to get back into civilian life. I was offered various positions off the civil service list. One was a tunnel guard, to walk inside the tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, keep the traffic moving. I couldn't see that. Another was a bridge toll collector, and I wouldn't enjoy that. And waiting for a fireman's assignment, and I would have had 2 years seniority, because when I went on the list, being in service, you automatically were eligible for seniority in those days. In the meantime, I bought my. I used to be in the auto upholstery business, and went back to work for my old boss, and he passed away, and I was able to purchase his shop with the GI Bill loan, and that's how I went to work on my own as a auto upholsterer. And that was what I did in those days, keep my family roof over their heads and food in their bellies.
Did you make any close friendships while in the service?
I did while I was in service, but once we were discharged, we kind of drifted apart. We never kept in touch. One or two people I did get to see. One guy was worked up in Elmira in his in a casket company, and I stopped by to see him while I was in the reserves on reserve weekend. But other than that, I didn't keep in touch with him.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
No, I'm not a joiner, believe it or not.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Yes, it did, and I'd rather not discuss it.
How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, you mature in a hurry, you know. As I say, you get different thoughts about, of course, our war was fought because we were invaded, but war in general is, to me, is not the answer. I know you have to do it sometime, but and like I say, I'd rather not go into it.
You mentioned being in the reserves afterwards, and some of the support that you did for Korea and Vietnam. Would you like to?
Being self-employed, I was able to spend quite a bit of time in the active reserves. Of course, we had a mandatory 2 weeks a year active duty, and then 1 weekend a month. And I would put in 2 or 3 weekends a month, and sometimes I'd go on 30 days active duty because I could leave my shop when I felt like it. And created quite a hardship on my wife to raise the family. I had 2 girls and a boy, but she did a good job. I'm sure she did. And I got to see a lot of active duty time. And as I say, I retired as a lieutenant colonel. Going to celebrate my 61st wedding anniversary, November 10th, which is also the Marine birthday. So I guess I'm a pretty lucky guy.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered in this interview?
I can't keep talking. I'm rambling. I'm not much of a speaker. I think I've said enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to do this interview with you, sir.
Well,
I really
enjoyed
appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.